I'm from the camp, of course, understanding what this neurotoxin is doing in the nerves and in the body, that I believe it belongs nowhere in the human body under any circumstance ever. That's just my opinion, and people will argue me on that, and that's fine. But I know what it's doing, and I know what the trade offs are. So for me, it's not a question of if this will happen to somebody, it's a question of when.
Welcome to Vitality Made Simple. The following production is for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you need medical advice, call your doctor. Now, let's go to Vitality Made Simple.
Welcome to Vitality Made Simple. This is the podcast that equips you to feel better, look better, and to enjoy better relationships. Now, if you've ever wondered about the potential side effects, short-term and long-term, of the injection of botulinum toxin A, this podcast is for you. We have a world expert. I want to introduce you to Gretch Elizabeth. Welcome, Gretch.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. This means a lot. I love to do this.
This means a lot to me because you're someone I so highly respect. You're so brave, you're articulate, you're smart, you're compassionate, and you're dedicated to the truth. We've never lived in a time that was so important. And the information that you're going to share today, I really think can potentially save the lives of many, many people. So we're going to talk about Botox, folks, and there's a lot of other names. This topic came upon my radar about 5 years ago as I started seeing some things that troubled me in my profession. And so, Gretch, tell us what got you interested. Introduce yourself.
Okay.
Let our audience get to know you. I have a wonderful family of listeners that will fall in love with you like I have.
Thank you so much. So yes, I'm Gretch Elizabeth, or as my parents call me, Gretchen. But to most, it's Gretch. And I got into this line of work in a way that was entirely unexpected. And so my formal education is in teaching. I'm a former high school teacher. And while I was on maternity leave from teaching, my sister went in for a one-time treatment of Botox, or botulinum toxin A, and she had that treatment done to her forehead. So we call these 11 lines, or the glabellar area. So she had a treatment there and was really excited about having it. She went over the lunch hour with a friend of hers, kind of on a whim. It was on her radar, but not on that day. So her friend Sarah said, "Hey, I'm going to get my Botox. You should come with me. Let's go do it together." And my sister's name is Heidi, and Heidi said, "Oh yeah, I'd like to do that. I've been wanting to do it. I've been waiting to do it." She thought she was going to do it with me, her sister, but she decided just in that moment to go for it. And so she went and had a very small treatment. So we look at these treatments in units, and and in the unit scale, it was considered quite small. And I remember 3 days afterwards, she waited 3 whole days to tell me, which is crazy because we're really close. We live in the same city. We've grown up together. We've just been together our whole lives. And she waited 3 days to tell me. And I'll never forget that moment because she sent me a car selfie. And in that moment, she sent me this picture where she looked like she was glowing. And she said, "Guess what I did?" Just like that. And I was like, what did you do? I could kind of tell in that photo that she sent me that she looked really beautiful. Her face was glowing and she seemed very happy. And she said, "I did it. I pulled the trigger. I got Botox." And I was like, "Call me right now, Missy. We have a lot to talk about." Because I wanted all the details, of course. And it was on my radar too. So I want people to know that I was considering getting it as well. I just, I was on maternity leave and I was going to wait a few months, but I had a consultation actually set up for a few weeks, after my sister's appointment to go learn about it. And so in that moment, we just talked about it. And I was like, "Wow, did it hurt? Did it this? Did it that?" And she was super excited. But little did she know in that 3 day moment that just 2 more days later, that she was going to fall down with really serious side effects that at the time presented either like a stroke or heart attack. So it was really scary. And I can totally launch into the progression of symptoms and what that looked like if you're interested.
Yes, we are interested.
Okay, so she was in the bathroom and she was doing her hair. She had just finished straightening it, and she felt this sort of wave come over her where it went from her toes all the way up to her head, kind of like, ooh, like this. And one side of her body felt tingly, and then it went numb, and she got tunnel vision. So her vision started to kind of go in and out like this. And she said in her ears, there was an auditory, like something auditory happened as well, kind of like it went wah, 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 like this, like a noise. And she said she fell down to the ground. Her heart started racing, and she thought that she was having a stroke or something was seriously wrong. And because her heart was racing so much, at the same time, she's like, well, maybe this isn't a stroke. This could be a heart attack. What's happening to me? Fortunately, she had her phone in the bathroom, and she called my mom, and my mom, came over. She would have called me, but having, I was in my last trimester and getting ready to deliver, just a couple weeks away, or not couple, 4 weeks away from delivery. Well, we weren't sure. My due date was kind of
Mhm.
like, when is she due? So 2 to 4 weeks away. And so she called my mom first because she knew that she could get there probably faster than me. And my mom came over, found her on the ground, kind of
Mm.
slumped over. And my mom has EMT training. So my mom does have a background medically. And my mom determined pretty quickly that she was not having a heart attack and that it wasn't presenting like a stroke either, but something was seriously wrong because my sister couldn't talk. She couldn't form her sentences. She was stuttering. She was sweating. She was just not all there. And my mom said, what have you done differently? You've done something different, trying to troubleshoot. And Heidi uttered, well, I had Botox a few days ago. And my mom's very words were, well, that wasn't very smart. Let's take you back to the doctor to find out what the heck has happened here. Something is seriously wrong. And so my mom got her out to the car and took her back to the provider, which was one of the very best dermatologists in the city where I live, super well known, had a very big practice, and got her in right away. And the doctor's response was very empathetic. He said, it appears as though you may be having a reaction of some kind. However, I don't think it's from the botulinum toxin that you had. I think this is that you're experiencing anxiety as this toxin has taken effect. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice all of a sudden. As this toxin has taken effect and it's doing what it does in the body physiologically, you're having an anxious response to it. So he said, I'm going to give you something to take home with you to calm your system. And you should be fine in just a couple days and not to worry about it. But the problem was that she was not fine in just a couple days. In fact, she got worse, and she then experienced difficulty swallowing and inability to hold her head upright and severe muscular weakness that then took her to the emergency room. And then she went to the emergency room and she reported her side effects there. And they said the same thing that the doctor said. This can't be from the Botox. We've never seen this before. We think you have anxiety. And then they sent her home, which put her on this really long health journey to try to figure out what happened in her body that lasted not just weeks, not months, but years. It was very dramatic.
Well, she was unable to work for a year and a half,
That
correct?
is correct.
Gretch,
She was.
how old was she at the time, and how many units did she have?
Yeah, she was 36 years old and she had 33 units.
Oh my goodness, it's unbelievable. This came upon my radar about 5 years ago. I was speaking at a women's dental conference,
Mhm.
and I spoke, of course, on gut health and poop, and talked about the importance of dental professionals addressing early inflammation because of how it impacts the body before it impacts the teeth. And then the next speaker, Gretch, was talking about Botox. And um, I think I'd been very naive before that, just about the um, popularity, maybe, of
Mhm.
it. And the whole lecture was about how much money you can make in a really short time in a dental office,
Yes.
as a dentist, as a dental hygienist, um, because people have to keep having it done.
Yes.
So it's something every, what, 3 to 5 months.
That's correct.
The money was staggering, and I left sort of feeling numb about my profession. I mean, I've at that point I was 35 years in. I'm now 40 years in as a dentist, and it was shocking to me because our whole intent is to do no harm. It's to help people, and nothing was mentioned in that lecture about the black box warnings.
Mhm.
So please inform our listeners about this because it's way bigger than we could
It
ever imagine.
It really is. And so, before I talk about the black box warning, you mentioned something that I want to touch on. You mentioned how this was presented to you in kind of like a trade show type
Uh,
scenario. Is that
Actually,
correct?
it was actually a continuing education
Education
class. So it
class.
was a
Okay.
scientific um, venue
Okay.
of licensed dentist and dental hygienist, and
Yes.
it was presented as, wow, everybody
Wow.
needs this.
Yes.
You need to be doing this. Uh, no risk.
Wow. Yeah, and I've heard that story echoed from others, and it always really surprises me how, this is presented, and it always is presented in that way, and that how this can, double your revenue or triple
Hmm.
your
Hmm.
business and these kinds of things. And then I wanted to take that one step further. The other thing that then has been echoed to us is that when practitioners then say, "Hey, yeah, I want to do that," we understand that they just go to a course, a weekend long course to become certified then to administer the product. And these courses, they pay between $1,200 and $2,200 to attend. And it's, a weekend long course, maybe, 5 to 6 hours the first day and another six the second day. And then they leave that course being certified to then purchase the product and start using it on their patients the very next day, Monday, even if they wanted. And so the amount of training that has been given, and sometimes with no hands on experience, is just not enough considering the warning label that this product has, which you're right, it's called a black box warning label. And that is the strictest label that our country, the FDA, puts on a product, basically stating that the use of this product may cause severe life threatening side effects, disability, or even a fatality. And so that label came out in 2009. And so it didn't begin with the product, which is always very interesting to me. So this product was approved first for blepharospasm in 1989, which is abnormal blinking of the eye. And then just a few years later, in the early 2000s, like 2001, they then approved it for cosmetic use in the forehead area only and kind of the crow's area here around the eye. And it didn't have that warning label. But what happened was a lot of people fell very ill, and even there was some fatalities. And so there was over $600 million in litigation against the manufacturer for these severe side effects, which is in fact botulism. So in 2009, the FDA said, "Hey, this product has to have this stricter warning label to warn the public or to increase the informed consent about the product." But the problem is that it didn't begin with it. And so there's several years in there where the narrative was born that this product is completely safe. And unfortunately, that narrative has just carried through all the way until today, 2025. And we're still hearing that from emergency room physicians and the highest level
Yeah.
nurses and doctors that it's completely safe. And it's not true.
Well, what are people getting when somebody shows up to have this procedure done, often in a wellness clinic? At least around here, that's how it's advertised. Uh, what kind of warnings or what are they told? What do they sign?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I can tell you that there is no universal requirement on what somebody signs. And I've been doing this for a long time now. And so I have seen hundreds of informed consent or consent forms from our group members. I always say, "Hey, what'd you sign? Do you have a copy of that? Could I look?" And They're all over the place. I've seen the exact black box warning label shrunk down into the tiniest print. It's 54 pages long. And then they transfer that onto, a paper printed out. And it's so small that who's ever going to take the time to read that? And really, the real risks aren't outlined until the very end, page 53 and
Um,
54, where it presents the risk of botulism. I've also seen watered down versions of it where it says, oh, the most that could happen is that you may experience a little bit of bruising, you may have a headache, and then the entire consent form focuses on aftercare, what they should do when they leave the office. And so they're really just all over the place. And that is one area where the team that I work on is really working hard to improve the legislation and lobby, right, these groups, the FDA and the CDC, to increase the regulations there with that paperwork in itself, because unfortunately, it's just all over the place.
so people get side effects not just from short term, immediate use, like what happened to Heidi,
Mhm.
but tell us about people who say been using this for years
Yeah.
and think they're in the clear.
Yeah, and that happens. I'll tell you, it's one camp or the other, and you never know what camp you're going to be. My sister suffered catastrophically really early on day 5. We've had other people come in who know something is extremely wrong and they haven't even left the office yet. We've had people fall off the table and hit their head. We've had people get themselves out to the car and then know that something is seriously wrong. And then we have people who are weeks in and sort of have these weird things happen to them. And then all of a sudden, they have a cascade of adverse effects that they can't ignore anymore. And then we have people who use it for years and are fine until all of a sudden they have that one treatment that pushes them over the edge. And so, what I can tell you about this neurotoxin when it's introduced into the body is that everybody's body is going to react differently. And it also depends on whether or not it stays in the peripheral nerves within the muscle, or if it migrates outside of that area. That makes a difference. And then also, the toxin, just because of what it is and its mechanism of action, it has a summation effect or a cumulative effect in the body. And so, one may be okay for even 10 years. And then all of a sudden, the body hits this point where it can't have anymore. And it's like, nope, can't do it. And then they experience severe adverse effects. I'm from the camp, of course, understanding what this neurotoxin is doing in the nerves and in the body, that I believe it belongs nowhere in the human body under any circumstance ever. That's just my opinion, and people will argue me on that, and that's fine. But I know what it's doing, and I know what the trade offs are. So for me, it's not a question of if this will happen to somebody, it's a question of when.
No, I appreciate your perspective because I'm in the camp with you, and being a probably a chicken for needles, and then also it just didn't make sense to think about putting a toxin in our bodies as integrative medicine practitioner. We want to detox. Now, the mechanism of action involves atrophy or
Mhm.
of the muscle. If you
Right.
use it long enough, right,
Yeah.
the muscle actually atrophies. So, what happens to um, adding Botox to an atrophied muscle?
It's a much greater risk of migration or toxin spread. So that's one of the ways that this toxin may migrate throughout the body, is that when a muscle uses it over and over again, it's paralyzed because that's the
Mhm.
mechanism. It causes chemical denervation of the nerves. And this action actually causes muscle paralysis. And when we paralyze the muscle intentionally over and over and over again, it becomes more widespread, of course. And then the muscle, when it receives the neurotoxin again, it just can't hold it. It leaks outside of the muscle, and it migrates into unintended areas. And that's just one of the ways that this may happen. And people unfortunately don't realize that. And in the paperwork for the product, the patient safety warning label, it talks about muscle atrophy being a counterindication for the product use. So here you have a product that intentionally causes this, but after a period of time, it becomes its own counterindication. That doesn't really make sense, does it?
No, and I don't know for sure, but I would think, Gretch, that when someone sees this atrophied muscle, it's like add more to it.
Mhm.
It might even, okay, you had 40 units before or whatever, and now you need 50. I don't
Yeah,
know
then
how
and
that
they don't
works.
notice. I think it's because most people who regularly use it, they sort of overlap that. So they go back in the 3 to 4 month time where they probably only have experienced a little bit of movement back. And so they're never fully going back to baseline. And most people won't go fully back to baseline for a really long time because the body brings or restores muscle movement by sprouting and growing new nerves that are able to function properly. And that takes time. New nerve growth doesn't happen overnight. I know they say 3 to 4 months, but we're seeing that that's really not the case. That new nerve growth happens over a lot longer period of time. And so the more you use it, the riskier it becomes.
Wow. And what great news it is that there is new nerve growth. I mean, that gives hope to anybody listening who's like,
It
"Oh, I
does.
didn't know." So you've talked about, I mean, folks, Gretcha's information is incredible. And you've talked about how this toxin in the body can contribute to the reactivation of things like Epstein Barr,
Mhm.
Lyme, and that's very logical in terms of just toxin load.
Yeah.
We think about this toxin bucket we all have, and we want to keep it empty. Please tell us what you've learned in that area.
A lot. And it's because I've seen it happen to many people. So, my sister unfortunately had this happen to her, where a few months in, she developed a condition called, it's not Epstein Barr. Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. First, she had Hashimoto's thyroiditis.
Oh,
So, this
yeah.
toxin elicits an immune response in the body. And then she developed that autoimmune condition with her thyroid. And then after that, she had the condition. It's on the tip of my tongue. I can never. Oh, yeah, I got it. Um, I want to say it right. CMV,
Oh,
and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
the C.
Cytomegalovirus. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
the
yeah,
C word. I'm like, is it Cyto
yeah, yeah,
or Miglio virus? I know I'm
yeah,
not
yeah.
saying that right. So
Right,
CMV for short, and that is in the same camp as the EBV and some of
right,
those
right.
others. And so we see that happen because the immune system gets very triggered by the use of this neurotoxin. I mean, this neurotoxin is extremely lethal. And of course, you put it into the body and your immune system is going to react. And so we have people who develop these secondary conditions, whether they're those retroviruses that are more dormant, even varicella, that's another good example,
Mhm.
or autoimmune conditions like Sjögren's and lupus and MCAS, and there's a whole long list, as you know, of those.
Yes, and the Botox or the botulism A toxin is so resistant to heat. I mean, I grew up. My dad worked in a warehouse and would bring home um, like bent cans, of food. We had to be so careful. We would have this
Mhm.
extra food, but we didn't want to get botulism.
Mhm.
But some of these products talk about it being a purified protein. So that seems to make people think, oh, well, this is not botulism. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. It's part of their marketing. And they talk about that it's purified in order to intentionally mislead the public into thinking that because it's purified, it's somehow better or different from naturally occurring botulinum toxin A that you would find in a canned good. But that's not the case at all. Of course, this neurotoxic protein goes through a process in the lab in order to purify it for use. It has to, or it can't be used. Purified only means that the neurotoxic protein that's in Botox or Dysport has gone through a process to make it contaminant free. All you have in that dose is pure botulinum toxin A. So that purification isn't making it clean or less toxic or more safe. It's actually just making it 100% pure, as in lethal, as close as you can get to what you would find naturally occurring in a canned good. And you're right, it is extremely resistant to heat. And that is how this neurotoxin forms. They put it through a process that's without air in a low acidic environment, right? And over time, this neurotoxin grows. And it's the same thing in a canned good.
Wow. It's it's crazy. Thank you so much again for being here. I want to talk about the emotional impact of
Mhm.
of Botox because on Vitality Made Simple, we talk about it's all about relationships. And, we're designed with a lot of nonverbal communication.
Yeah.
And we have a new baby granddaughter, and she's about a month old, and she's already, I mean, I can tell she can see, these smile love lines that I have, and she's reacting to um, expression. So what have you seen? I know that you've seen so much, Gretch, because I watch your Instagram and am amazed by people who have experienced serious side effects in this area. So
Mhm.
tell us about that.
I've seen a lot, and it's difficult to talk about because I do look at the bigger picture of what this means. And when you bring
Mhm.
up children, it does have an effect. I believe this neurotoxin has an effect on people's children and their development.
Mhm.
And so, when a person is not able to mimic the facial expressions of another, it does change our emotional regulation and how we relate to people. And this has kind of been sort of a buzz topic in the social communities the last year or so. But what people don't realize is that the research early on, all the way back in the early 2000s, was showing that botulinum toxin does this, or, in studies. And so there's a whole collection of studies that I encourage people to go back and read. And I have my notes here. So the one that I think is really good is that they did a study where they found the link between facial feedback and neuronal activity in very
Yeah.
specific
Yeah.
parts of the brain. So in the amygdala region or the limbic, circuitry area, and that this, when we applied botulinum neurotoxin and induced the denervation, that we found that the facial feedback is in fact influenced, that it modulates it. And so this is really interesting. And then researchers went on to do studies where they showed people respond to photographs, emotional photographs of people in pain or experiencing anger or any number of different emotions. And then they, did MRI scanning to see what was happening in the brain. And they actually could see, differences there versus the group that didn't have the botulinum toxin. And so we are seeing that it changes the person's ability to not just regulate emotion, but to relate to emotion in a normal way. Because when we can't make those facial expressions ourselves, there's a link there. It's fascinating. And there's a lot more that needs to happen in this area of research. But, this manufacturer believes that this is a good thing and that we can use this to market this product for uses like depression or other anxiety type conditions. And so I think that that's what they're gearing up to do in the future. I mean, we know it goes into the brain and we know it affects things in this way.
Yes, it has to. I mean, anything that's injected is going to impact the whole body. Um, as I started researching this years ago, I've compiled research. So I will have that, folks, on my website, and also get some of Gretch's to add to it. It's just a
For sure.
free tab that I have of research. The thing about it is that it probably happens pretty slowly to people, so they
It
don't
does.
realize this disconnect that they start to feel. As I was researching it a couple of years ago, I found an article that said things I wish I'd known about Botox. And it was this list, but it was totally a propaganda piece. One was, my husband doesn't know when I'm angry. And I was like, oh, I want my husband to know when I'm angry. That's the whole point of, communication. That's part of communication, is this of sensing each other's emotions, but they were placing that as a good thing.
Yeah, as a good thing. And then we have to think about, like, again, like our children or our grandchildren, and if their mom, or their dad perhaps can't show emotion on their face, what's the long-term impact of that on our children? And that's what keeps me up at night
Mhm.
because, of course I go take everything to the dark place and worry that this could be very damaging. And I guess time will tell. We'll learn eventually.
No, I think it is. And even a deeper message, Gretch, is what are women thinking? I mean, to me,
Yeah.
this is here I am, 66. So I've seen a lot in terms of women um, gaining a voice, and I'm not at all a women's liber. I am just uh, highly highly interested in communication and relationships
Mhm.
as related to physical health. And women are believing they're not good enough. Women are somehow thinking that having birthdays is a bad thing and they need to be looking in the mirror all the time and criticizing their own God-given features. Um, what is your take on this this mindset?
It begins very early on, and it's the way that we're raised, it's the way that our mothers spoke about themselves, it's cultural, and
Mm,
this goes back to the beginning of time. And so really what it is it's ageism, and
mm,
other cultures obviously view aging in a more positive light, but where I've grown up in the United States, it's definitely looked at as a very negative thing. And it makes me sad. Now that I've seen what this neurotoxin does to people, I can tell you that universally across the board, every person that I've been in contact with that's touched my life in some way that's suffering would rather feel good in their body than look good. And unfortunately, it's not until someone goes through the trauma of losing their health do they realize that those fine lines, those wrinkles really meant nothing in the first place, and that wasn't what was important. But that's a lesson that everybody unfortunately has to learn on their own because it requires a heart change. So I say that the use of cosmetic injectables boil down to a matter of the heart. And so it's different for every single person.
it is, and that's why it was so essential to hear from you because there's nothing worse as a clinician than seeing somebody with regret in any area and they'll say, oh my goodness, Debbie, why didn't somebody tell me about,
Mhm.
fill in the blank? And
Mhm.
um and I'm starting to see some of these side effects here. I'm seeing things like eyebrows that are kind of crooked because
Mhm.
of the muscular atrophy. I'm seeing some of these fillers that have migrated to other parts of the face, and they're there to stay. Um, so so it is very, very concerning, and I don't want to see people regretting and being sad, wasting their life wishing they had not done something. I would
Mhm.
challenge every listener to think of somebody they really loved as a child. I thought of my grandmother, I called her Mama, and she was just, wrinkled up like, you know, I mean, the most beautiful person I can think of. And, we have to redefine beauty, right, Gretch?
We have to, and we have to look at it as our beauty evolves. It's not the same when you're
Mhm.
22 as when you're 42 or when you're 62 or then 82. And that's okay. It's not meant to be. And I saw your reel that you put up yesterday. I need to share that today. I meant to do that, but where you talked about how kind of your philosophy and how you earned, these lines on your face and that you didn't want to erase them. And so this requires a change in our mindset, a reframing to see that those lines actually show something completely different. It's not that they're showing our age, it's that they're showing our best moments, our happiest
Mhm.
times, our saddest moments, and our memories that make us who we are. And like you said, you think about your grandma and she was beautiful to you. The last thing
Mhm.
you were thinking about was the lines on her face. You loved that about her. And I
Yes.
tell that to people. When I see people's faces that are natural and move, I love that about them. And I'm like, it's a pity to me. It makes me sad to think that people would want to erase that because they actually are very meaningful. And it's like, what have you done in your life? Let's have a conversation. Let's talk about your life. That to me is how we build human connection. And so it does. It just makes me really sad to think that there's millions of people walking around with those stories removed from their physical self.
Yes, and your skin is gorgeous. I want listeners to
Thanks.
know that
It moves a lot.
yes, we can have pretty skin. We want to take care of our skin. It's not at all about that. But,
Right.
as we think about metabolic health, there's no way that these injectables make anybody more metabolically healthy
Mhm.
or filled with more vitality. One thing, Gretch, you know how you'll something will come on your radar and then several times it pops up. Well, when the continuing education class happened, then like 2 weeks later, I'm at getting my hair done and sitting there and looking at a People magazine, and this article was in there about Justine Bateman, who had written this book, Face.
I love her. Yes.
Oh, I love her. I would recommend. Wouldn't you recommend this book to people?
She's wonderful.
It's just talking about the lies that people have consumed and made part of the fabric of their being. But at the end of this book, she tells a story about these two young girls sitting in a cafe, and they're seeing some older women over there, and they're like, "Oh, look at them. Are those bags under their eyes really theirs? Wow." Like they were seeing it from a different perspective, like it had changed from being, oh, beauty is this plastic face that doesn't move, to they were seeing it as, oh, look how her forehead moves. Isn't that gorgeous? And I mean, this book was so much fun to read.
I love that. That's wonderful. I have a copy of it. I have to admit, I haven't read the whole
Uh-huh.
thing yet. I haven't gotten to that
Well,
story.
you well
I
you
can't
you
wait.
have
Now, today, I'm going to be like, I'm going to go pick up that book today.
you have your own stories. It's written in a really easy. It's like little vignettes that are 2 or 3 pages long, and it will tell stories where people have not felt good about their life, so they are doing this trying to make their life better,
Mhm.
and it doesn't. So there's just such freedom in the truth that you are presenting to people. You're
Mhm.
fearlessly presenting, and oh my goodness, I can't thank you enough. So
You're
what does
welcome.
somebody do, Gretch,
Mhm.
if they see they start to recognize maybe a side effect now? I mean, it might be brain fog, right? It might be a few it might be anything that they're just going, where is this coming from?
Yes.
What resources are available for those people?
Yeah, I'll tell you. And a little earlier on, you talked about connecting those dots. And so that's one thing I want people to, who maybe are your listeners that are using this product and they, seemingly fine, to realize and to keep in mind that sometimes this neurotoxic protein poisons the body really slowly. And so, you might just be waking up at night or having brain fog, like you
Mhm.
said, or, certain foods you're not tolerating anymore, or you're getting
Oh,
headaches, or you're feeling fatigued, or just weaker than normal. You don't have the stamina that you used to. To go back and to think about, well, yeah, I am using this neurotoxin that by definition is the world's most lethal neurotoxin. So lethal, we have to dose it in millionths of 1 milligram. Okay, this is such a tiny amount. There's thousands and thousands of reports of people who are suffering from it. And to just really think about that, is this what's causing me to feel not 100% like myself? So I would tell those people to join our online support group, because nothing helps people connect the dots and to learn more than reading those firsthand accounts from people of what's happened to them. And our group has been going for a decade now. And we have 40,000 members. And so you can imagine the numbers of stories that we have in there, just thousands and thousands for people to go through. And then also to visit our website, Tox Safety, that's TOX safety.com. And we have a ton of resources there. We have education centers. So whether you're someone who may be suffering, whether you're a medical provider who gives the product or administers the product, or you're just someone who wants to learn more about it, there's a center there for you to learn more. And then, if you are someone who develops severe side effects, we have all of the emergency resource information there as well. So, I would tell people to look at our website, join our support group, follow along with us on social media. And then follow along with our friends, really, because I think the use of injectables, again, boils down to it being a matter of the heart. And when we surround ourselves with like minds, with people like you, Debbie, and myself, and others who want to do this in a more healthful way, and we see aging as being beautiful and not something to fear, that it just makes it so much easier. So follow those accounts, surround yourself with those like minds, because it's really fun to do and it's empowering. It makes you feel good.
It does. It comes back to relationship, Gretch.
It does.
That's what you do so beautifully, and you don't shame anybody because these side effects are very underreported.
Mhm.
I've heard you say maybe 1% to 10% are
Yep,
reported. Is
that's
that
right.
still accurate?
That is
Um,
still accurate.
so it can be very tough on people to admit it.
Mhm. That too. Nobody wants to admit that their favorite beauty treatment is actually causing, poisoning in their body. Nobody wants to admit that.
Well, no, and people just will go up to people and say, "Oh, you look great," so they get reinforced all the time. So maybe we
We
can
do.
start the trend of, "Wow, you've been smiling a lot. Look at those smile lines. Look at those
Yeah,
love
they're
lines."
beautiful. I love
Yes,
that about you.
we want to change that.
Well, and to compliment people with meaningful compliments. I mean, I've said this on another podcast that I was on. It's really easy to say, "Hey, I like your shirt." Oh, hey, physical, to focus on the physical things that we see. But let's compliment people on the deeper things. Like, "Hey, you had that situation at work that you told me about, and I think you really handled that well. I learned something from that. So if that ever happens to me, I'm going to be thinking about the story that you told me and how you handled that so well." Any kind of things like that that have a deeper meaning where we're complimenting people's character attributes. That I think is something that we just need to do more often to help.
Gretch, thank you for that. I
You're welcome.
that will thank you so much for that because we are so inclined to just be trite. And that
Yes.
requires more thought, that requires a deeper relationship.
Mhm.
Um, so you'll see that one on my Instagram because that is fantastic. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Anything else that our listeners need to know today? I mean, I would hope that we can revisit this in six
Of
to nine
course.
months. This is so essential. Um, Anything else that you want to add?
Um, let's see here. I mean, there's just so much. I think one thing I would like to add is that the Never Talks page is designed to be a resource too. And that if there's something someone reads on there and can't find the citation for, or you have a question, reach out to me. I'm very active. I get back to messages. And if I don't have time, I have team members that are in there that are willing to get back to people. We will connect you with the research. That's the most important thing. Like, I'm not making things up here. When I, cite statistics or I say certain things, it's because I've read it in studies. And then I've also then seen it happen in real life anecdotally. So we see that this is in fact happening in real time. And so a lot of people come to the page and, they can't find something, ask. I will connect you with the information, whether it be by email or comment. I just don't want people to be lost when they're going through all 500 posts of ours because there's a lot there to go through.
It is, and it can be kind of emotionally draining when you
It can
see
be.
some of these, for me, seeing these young mothers at a soccer game and they're talking about how they're emotionally disconnected
Yeah.
from their children after one dose of Botox, and they're just you know heart sad that they wondering if they'll ever get back their life.
Yeah.
So know that, listeners, this is the site is something to really uh take in doses. Take in
Yeah, taking
doses.
doses. It is
Yeah,
hard to see people suffering.
it
And I've
is.
struggled with that too. And especially because most of these people, especially the ones you see on the page, these are people that I have worked directly with and have built a relationship with. And I know their entire story and what they're struggling with in real time. And I have to take breaks too. because it's heavy. It's really
Hmm.
heavy to see someone at their worst moments. And that's what we do. That's what our team members do. That's what I do. We sit with people when they're at their lowest because unfortunately, there is no cure for this. So when this happens to people, when this neurotoxin goes south in the body, there is no magic pill that you can go pick up at the pharmacy to fix it. And even the life saving measure, antitoxin, is not given. It's so rare that somebody can go into the emergency room and be approved for that. It only happens in cases where a fatality will result without it. And so we've only seen this happen. I've done this, like I said, almost 9 years now. And I can name 5 people that I had, a relationship with that were given the antitoxin. Just 5. That's it. And so that's how rarely it's used. So that's what I want people to know. If this neurotoxin goes south, you are fending for yourself. It's very difficult to treat the secondary conditions and the symptoms of mild to moderate to severe botulism. And we see that all along the spectrum.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you again, Gretch.
You're welcome.
And thank you, listeners, for joining us. Vitality Made Simple is all about relationships. Ultimately, when you feel good, you have more to invest in the relationships in your life. When we're at the end of our life, we're going to look back and we're going to be talking about the people we loved and the adventures we had and living out our purpose. We're never going to be thinking, oh my goodness, I had, a little crow's feet or I had, something around my mouth. No, we're going to be thinking relationships. So thank you all for listening. Thank you for sharing. Join Gretch on Instagram at Never Talks. Is that also Facebook, Gretch? I'm
Yes,
not on
also
Facebook.
on facebook.com/never talks.
Never Talks. And then Talk Safety is the website, which is loaded with incredible information. And join me on Instagram, having fun there, and share this with anybody that it might help. This is not to be judgmental. This is to be informative and to help people live without regret. Blessings until next time.
Thanks for joining us on Vitality Made Simple podcast. Be sure to visit drdebbieozment.com for our courses and resources designed to help you feel better, look better, and enjoy better relationships. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Thanks for joining us.